Hello. As I'm waiting on quail eggs to be delivered today, eek, I thought I'd do a little video on why my 16-year permaculture garden, food forest, is still a dwarf. The short answer is paranoia and ease of harvest. But I want to go into a little more detail on that. Look at how pretty Saskatoons get this time of year. They're just covered in blooms up there. And then over here is that mostly dead cherry tree that's apparently going to fruit. Sandwiched between two service berries or Saskatoons, depending on what you want to call them. So, you can see that's the only full-size tree, and it's not technically mine, and of course it predates me. But we've had many of these trees 14, 15 years. Budding out also. There's pretty pink buds on the apple tree. And I've been letting it get a little bit taller. That's probably about 18 to 20 feet now, but I do need to trim off some of this, because that's just getting really awkward, so definitely need to do that. And this is a pear that I've had for the same amount of time as the apple, 14, 15 years. At first I wasn't so good at getting bare root trees established, so I did fail with a couple of apricots in these exact same locations first. So that's why it was probably 14 instead of 16 for my first trees put in. And then another year or two after that, I put in that cherry. But I specifically picked it to be a small cherry. These are both standard trees. The apple and pear I keep really, really stiffly trimmed. And this native cherry is only supposed to get about 8 foot tall, so it's more of a bush. That cherry that's blooming for the first time this year and looks real scraggly, that one's supposed to get about 25 foot, so that'll be a bit more height. And the same thing with the stumpy little plum that's right about here. All of these things are smaller than your average tree. A little bit of history on this house. When I first moved in, and I did not get a copy of this picture, it would be great if I had. When I first moved in, the neighbor at the time showed me a photograph of 13 pine trees, all about 60 foot tall, that had fallen like Lincoln logs all around the house. And he says the shed wasn't there. It fell and crushed the corner of the fence that's behind the shed. This is apparently only about a 17 or 18-year-old gutter because it knocked the gutter off the end, and it nicked the corner of the roof. And then I didn't find out until much later, after owning the house for a while, that it did snap part of the support joist on the outside edge there. And doesn't seem to be structural enough to be causing any problems. So, that gives you the idea that on occasion, this here hilltop, it gets some really serious wind weather events. The weather event that caused that particular outcome was in Pittsburgh, colloquially known as the Kennywood wind shear. And I do believe you can Google that and find out that it was a storm that had a gust of wind, 60 miles an hour, blew through as a wall. And then it went back to kind of normal, but the reason it got called Kennywood, which is a, what do you call them? Amusement park around here. It's been an amusement park since before 1900, as far as I know. It's our oldest one. It took the pavilion for the whip, which is like a teacup type of ride, down and killed a few people. It's a very tragic event. So, in this hillside, sometimes when the wind comes through, it really, really comes through. So, even though my garden has been growing perennials for 16 years straight, I do not plan to grow anything at a height greater or up to 30 feet. I think 25 feet is going to be my absolute maximum, and that's going to be with strong consideration as well as to how close to the house it is. Thunderstorms, the wind blows this way, but not usually in those unpredictable big bursts. The prevailing winds are downhill. Although sometimes if it gets really hot and the water is still cold, it will blow the other way. And the weather events that we get catch the narrow side of my house and just blast right through here. They send everything falling over. There was one time, about 10 years ago, I'd say at this point, maybe 12. When I moved in, there was the one remaining pine tree was right where this neighbor's garden is, up in the yard, there. So about in the middle of their yard, there was a massive pine tree. And, there was a time when I came home at night, and from level with this person's roof up, the whole tree had just torn right off. The rest of the tree was there. It just snapped the top of that pine tree right on off. So, that is the primary reason that my 16-year now, food forest is as short as it is. I'm very careful not to let things get too tall. And the second reason is, that one plum bloom opened. That's so cute. That's adorable. I doubt I'll get a plum because I do think they at least need to get pollinated, but hooray, first bloom off of the plum tree. Yeah, the other reason is ease of harvest. It is much harder to harvest the tops of even my 15-foot cherry bush when compared with shorter shrubs like this Saskatoon that get 5 to 10 foot tall and have malleable branches. So this plum's going to get kind of big, but I also harshly trim this one mostly currently has just been trimmed by the deer for a couple years now. I'd like it to get bigger. But with the cherry, it's been wanting to die so much that I haven't trimmed it as much. But you can see on the apple and the pear very strongly that I have these trimmed, even though that apple's supposed to get 35 feet tall. Most of its mass is only, oops, I just walked into that. Oof. Most of its mass is only about 6 foot tall. 6.5 tops. And then it's got some spindly bits that need to be trimmed that go much higher than that. I'm trying to strike a balance on the apple tree currently between the needs of getting more light, which the light's available way up there, and the needs of having something not tall, not leaning towards the house, and that kind of thing. Because when I planted these, the bushes were very well kept, and they were only this tall. So these got full sun at the time. They no longer do. So I have to change my approach. Yeah. So even though this tree is only a little taller than me and looks pretty young, it's solidly 15, 14 years old. Same with the pear. It'll be interesting to see how fast the other trees catch up. So, I think that pretty well covers the topic that I wanted to talk about. My very first plant, the one that's been here exactly 16 years, is this native, local adapted variety of elderberry here. And that is the tallest it gets, which is a little under 8 feet. If you get York, the Sambucus canadensis variety that's available through catalogs, they get more like 20 or so feet tall. They're very vigorous. And these ones just are a little more gentle, and boy do they like their water. They're doing much better now that this trench is holding the water in place for them. One other fun factoid, and then we'll call it. I did some identification work finally on this currant that's been much too aggressive in the side yard and that I gave so much of away over the years. And discovered that that's buffalo currant, which is native to the Midwest. Not here, precisely, but pretty close. Pittsburgh isn't terribly far away from, say, Indiana. It's a one-day drive if you're stubborn. I'm very excited to have retained a few of those, and it gives me enough contentment of its status to go ahead and plant it on the front face first tier of this hillside, because it's such a good cropper. Oh my goodness, if you can get buffalo currant, it is tasty. It's sour. It's tasty hot jam. And whoo, do you get so many berries off that stuff. Wow. Alright. I imagine that once the eggs finally arrive, you will get one very excited video from me at that point. They were supposed to come yesterday. They've been in the mail for a little bit, so I'm a nervous wreck about it. I can't wait for them to come. Alright. I hope you're hanging in there. Take care. Bye.